I'm Casey Stricht, the principal of Solve Innovation Future. Solve's a philanthropic venture vehicle that makes direct investments into for-profit solver teams. Welcome to Solving from Anywhere, truly anywhere. We are currently in my kitchen, dodging paper towel holders, old pictures, bananas, and I'm excited to have you join us here today. We are thrilled to host an incredible group of speakers throughout the Solving from Anywhere webinar series. Today, we'll focus on the issue nearest and dearest to my heart, thinking about impact investing and looking to bring and drive funding towards innovative, tech-driven entrepreneurs, and really thinking about the ways that impact investing can drive change more broadly towards solving the world's most pressing problems. For those of you who may be new to Solve, welcome. We're excited to have you here today. Solve is an initiative of MIT, and our mission is to drive innovation towards solving the world's greatest challenges. We host global open innovation challenges each year to find, fund, and support entrepreneurs that we call solver teams. We connect those teams with our community of members who can support them further in impact in their work. We hope you enjoy today's introduction to Solve's community of passionate entrepreneurs and social impact leaders. I'm excited that we'll have the chance to welcome one of our solver teams, who I'll introduce in just a few moments, as well as one of our advisors, an MIT alum, Greg Shell, Managing Director of Bain Double Impact. Solve is lucky to have such a diverse group that we bring together every year. Because we put solver teams at the core of what we do, we connect foundations, corporations, nonprofits, and individuals to really drive and catalyze impact across our solver teams or for our solver teams. Our community includes more than 120 members who focus on their social impact goals through partnerships with Solve and with solver teams. Primarily, we focus on funding, employee support, in-kind resources, and strategic partnerships. Plug for members, please do not forget to register for virtual Solve Challenge Finals on September 29th. Happy to share more about what we do. During today's session, as I noted, we'll get the chance to hear from José Manuel Moller, the founder and CEO of Algramo, an organization building a high-tech reusable packaging system to counter plastic waste. I'll let Jose share more about Algramo and about their stage and what they're looking for and what they're trying to accomplish. But it will be a really fun conversation because we can actually allow Algramo and Jose to have a chance to chat with Greg as we really look across the funding continuum and think about how do we actually use different financial tools to drive impact. We're excited to have you join. After we hear from Jose and Greg, we'll bring our speakers back to the screen for an audience Q&A. If you're new to Zoom, take a look at the bottom of your screen. You'll notice a Q&A button. As questions come up throughout the event, feel free to share your questions directly in that box or to use Twitter using the hashtag #SolvingFromAnywhere. You can also upvote your favorite questions and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Without further ado, now that we've covered the basics, I'm so excited to introduce José Manuel Moller, founder and CEO of Algramo. I'll let him start with his elevator pitch. But before we do that, Jose, welcome. And just open with, how are you?
Now I'm doing great. Quite cold here in Santiago. I'm talking from Chile, but they're releasing us from the lockdown. So that's great news, at least for Santiago here in Chile.
Yeah, and maybe some fresh air. Change.
Yeah, here they were really strict. So now we have the chance to go out for running, for example. So we were for 4 months and a half on lockdown. So
yeah.
We're just recovering.
Hear all about the way COVID has changed the work. It is categorical for everyone that COVID has changed the work that we do. But before we do, can you give folks a sense of what Algramo is, what the solution is, and share a quick elevator pitch? Sure.
Algram is a social startup that from the regions wants to solve a problem that we call the poverty tax. The poverty tax, for the ones that they don't know what is it, it's an effect that happens when the families, for example, in low-income countries, they don't have enough liquidity to purchase the biggest packaging in the mom-and-pop stores, in the neighborhood stores, and they purchase the smallest one. For example, a quarter liter of cooking oil, a small amount of laundry detergent, etc. And doing that, they pay around 40% more than the people that has enough liquidity or money to purchase the biggest packaging, the poverty tax. So that's the first problem that we're trying to solve. And the second one that is the packaging waste. because most of that cost, the extra cost, is related with that packaging. So what we are doing, we're offering to the consumer the chance to purchase in bulk in a reusable container through a dispenser machine that's IoT. So today we're solving the poverty tax and the plastic waste and packaging waste through this solution that is a dispenser machine that's IoT connected with a smart packaging like this one that I have here, that behind this has an RFID chip. This packaging is recognized into the dispenser and it's linked with the user account that has an app. So you can pre-charge your app and you pay with the packaging in the concept and the solution that we call the packaging as a wallet. So just this year, we launched our first solution with Unilever here in Chile. It is a home delivery solution. Actually was prepared to be launched on the 1st of March. And here in Chile, the lockdown started on the 15th of March. So we're quite to be prepared 2 weeks before that. And what we're doing today, we are bringing the dispenser to a user's place. So the user is refilling at home, laundry detergent and dish soap. And this works like in a gas station. So you purchase as much as you want for the same price per liter. And then each time that you're purchasing, we give you a deposit into the packaging based on how much plastic you're saving. This gives you an economic incentive to take care of the packaging and use that packaging for the next purchase. So that's more or less where we are with this 2.0 solution, how we call it.
Yeah. So you're busy, is what you're telling me.
Because we start with Unilever. Actually, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be launching with Purina for pet food. So I think that currently people is getting, 15 kilos of pet food from the supermarket to their place. We're going to be doing that delivery at the cheapest price with zero waste. And the unit that we are using to deliver that is an electric tricycle. So we're trying to maximize our impact, or minimize, actually, to be honest, our impact at the footprint to deliver just the product, not the waste.
Yeah, and so tell me a little bit about sort of the genesis of this work, because when I think about Algramo and what you're trying to do, the market and the impact is somewhat obvious, right? It's less expensive and you're saving plastic. That seems like a no-brainer. But what you're really asking people to do is change their behavior. And how do you think fitting into that impact ecosystem, what's the driver for the change that allows your business to scale?
Yeah, something that's really important for us is to bring and to have a solution for all the consumers, not only the high-income millennials, vegetarians like me. We're trying to design this for everyone, that most of them make decisions based on price. Mm-hmm. Because everyone is saying that they're concerned about the climate crisis, but when you want to purchase something, most of the time you have to pay a premium if you want to be eco-friendly. Yeah. With Algramo, we are trying to shift this habit of consumption as fast as possible, and we think that the best way to do that is give you an economic incentive. So this is cheaper and more sustainable. It's a huge challenge, we know that. That's why we have been working on this around 7 years. But now we have our formula that we are reducing and offering the cheapest price in the market with zero waste. And that's how we are seeing that people is reusing the packaging. Yeah. For example, go ahead.
I was just going to say, has COVID accelerated that? Do you think people are more interested in that solution, and why?
Yeah, there's a bright side and dark side around COVID. The good side is people is at home, so they have much more time to understand this new system because it has different pieces that are brand new for them. Yeah. But also we are losing all the volume of people, for example, that it's in a fresh market, because we used to install this dispenser in a fresh market or outside school. So that's it's not happening anymore, at least this year. But today, also people is really concerned around the packaging and washing the packaging. I don't know if you, for example, order something on a delivery, you have to wash it with bleach, or at least that happened here in Chile. But when you are reusing and bringing your own, there's no any risk because no one else touched it. So this is a contactless, cashless, and much more secure system. And that's something really important to mention, because reuse is part of the solution in the COVID context. It's not the opposite.
Yeah. The bleach thing's a little bit of a tricky topic in the US, but we'll leave the politics aside for now. That's what I think is pretty interesting. What you've described is effectively that you're trying to market a cost-effective solution, and that's the way that you think you can change human behavior. If that's the case, how and why is impact core to what you do, right? If you have a viable business model, you could go fundraise through traditional channels. You don't have to call yourself a social entrepreneur. Why is that important to the work that you're doing? And has that impacted your fundraising as you move from a closed Series A last year to a current Series B that you're exploring at the moment?
Yeah, it's very important. First of all, for circular economy and for reuse, there will be always money because this is like a really trendy and hot topic today. But I would say that's really important to have investors that they are aligned with the purpose of the company, because there are tons of decisions on, for example, where to go, on how to charge the price, on who are our customers. Those are decisions that are driven by purpose.
Yeah.
There's going to be market and money in any of the contexts, but from our perspective, we want to change the industry to impact as much people as possible. Yeah. And it's really relevant to have that alignment on the board. Otherwise, we could end up being like a really expensive brand for just a niche of high-income millennials. But we want to approach this as an industry approach and a global impact. So it's really important to have the right partners, especially now, as you were mentioning, that we are doing our second round. But actually, we're looking for investors. So if someone wants to have more details about us, they can connect us. It's really important to be aligned, not just on the strategy, but also on the reasons and why we're doing this. Because it's not just about the technology. The technology is the way how we produce the impact.
Yep. And one last question for you, as we kind of get close on time. If you were to do it all again, so you've had success, you've had a successful pilot, you're starting to see uptake, you're expanding into new geographies and with new business models with the 2.0 version, what would you do again? Or what would you do differently the next time around? Or you flip that question around, how can investors or how can finance better support you as you serve your beneficiaries and your customers?
I would say that one of the challenging part was to start from Chile. Chile is a really small and far away country in LATAM. Even for LATAM investor, we are a really small country. So I would say that was in the beginning really difficult to show to our partners, to our global partners, what we were doing. But I would stick to the plan to start from the mom and pop store, like really from the roots of their problem. But something that I would change from the beginning is to start from the beginning collaborating with corporate brands. In the beginning, actually, I was competing against them with our own private label brand, but I realized that it's much faster and you could be much more aggressive in partnership and collaborating with others. Especially that now the context is perfect because they have this commitment on plastic, most of the corporate brands they have. So this is the best moment to start doing this, but I would change that. I would collaborate from the beginning. Again, start from the roots, from the mom and pop stores, and try to build a relation from outside Chile as soon as possible.
Yeah. Well, you did yeoman's work. I don't even think you realize you really set us up nicely to transition to Greg, who's has that from a financial perspective, is working a little bit further upstream, or I should say downstream, realistically, from a funding perspective. And I think it's interesting to kind of play those conversations off of each other. But I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing and for your candor. We really appreciate that. It's not always easy to both share what you're doing in 10 minutes or less, but certainly to really engage in a conversation that we're all in a tricky place. And so it's helpful to really hear where you are, and we appreciate that. We're looking forward to welcoming you back. We're going to send you away for now. Everyone else, don't forget, you can start submitting your questions for Jose using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll bring you back into that conversation in just a few minutes. Now I'm psyched to welcome Greg Shell, Managing Director of Bain Double Impact at Bain Capital, one of the world's leading multi-asset alternative investments firm. And also, as we were learning before the call, an avid diver, which I didn't know before this call. A little fun fact, put you on the spot. But I guess similarly, Greg, thank you for joining us, first of all. We really appreciate you carving out the time. And I think I'd love to just start with, how are you?
Yeah, well, Casey, good to see you again, and to the audience. Thank you for welcoming me back to the MIT community. I think my answer would be like many of us, right? This is a strange time, for so many reasons. But I think to some degree, it's times like this where most change is possible. I think all of us are thinking and rethinking lots of different things within our career and personal life. So there's a certain element that is invigorating as well. And me as a resident optimist, stay focused probably more on those things and the things that I can myself control and alter. And I think, my team, on the Double Impact Fund, we think of the world in that way. And I think our product in many ways comes out of a context trying to produce that change. Yeah. And if anything, Casey, I'd tell you that the current context augurs for that perspective as much as I could have ever thought when we began the fund.
Yeah, someone once shared with me early on in my time in impact investing was that to succeed, you needed boundless optimism. Yeah. And it sounds somewhat silly, but I think it's true, because it's not that there are naysayers along the way, but that we are constantly looking for innovation and ways to apply old ideas in new ways. And that change is hard and is slow. And so how do you continue to push it forward? Boundless optimism along the way.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think if I had a companion, characteristic, it might be sort of boundless vision, about what's possible. I think the scale of many of the societal challenges that we face, you have to take a point of view of, is solving them valuable, and to what extent those solutions lend themselves to the private sector. Yeah. I think entrepreneurs like Jose give me confidence, that both of those things are true. Not only are they solvable, you can have real effect on them, but they also lend themselves to a private sector approach. Yeah. So along with your optimism, if you have the point of view and have a vision for a real business opportunity that comes out of these societal challenges, the more excited you become actually. Yeah. Perhaps, the vision and the optimism, can work together to get people to act in different ways.
Who needs vision? I like to just operate by the seat of my pants along the way. But I'm curious, so you didn't start your career in impact. I think it's helpful to have a little bit of a grounding of how you got involved in the work that you're doing now and how you ended up here. We should share with the audience more broadly. We really love having Greg on board as a member of our investment committee at Solver Innovation Future, a recommending body who helps basically keep me in line. But those folks, it's really nice to have individuals who have worked on both sides of impact, sort of more traditional investing in private sector, and those who've focused on impact primarily. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you made that move.
Yeah, I'm an interesting case in this regard. I think on the one hand, Casey, I had worked as a sort of investment professional since I was in college, and I had been taught a certain dogma that the market was always right, and there was this sensibility that markets are efficient and that capital sort of naturally flows to its areas of highest use. And part of the reason is that people are maximally profit seeking and sort of know what to do. And I think over a lifetime spent in the world of finance, among the many things you get to know is how untrue that is. One of the biggest reasons why it's not true is because you have this real lack of heterogeneity. You have opinions that collect and aggregate, and so homogenous, collections of any kind are how you weaken, the DNA strand, if you will, right? On the other hand, since I was really, a little kid, I've always sort of been somebody who believed deeply in a service commitment, and I have, through volunteership and ultimately through board service and direct service, I've always found myself not very far away from opportunities to serve. And I think my career and personal life sort of went on like that. I used to think of it as sort of in my 9 to 5. I'd spend the time, thinking about, the sort of capital flows. And I am an ardent capitalist on the one hand, but at night I would sort of, work to sort of help try to address all of the things that, capitalism gets wrong. And I think as I've grown and certainly in the work that I do with the Double Impact Fund, it's a much more integrated perspective. The system of capital flowing is highly inefficient, makes any number of errors, can actually trend toward malfeasance if you don't guide it at some level, and it misses out on lots of opportunities. And so this fund in many ways was my best chance. I used to describe it, Casey, as the two sides of my brain meeting each other for the first time. And it's really, in an effort to try to invest in things that help address some big societal challenges. So that's what the fund is meant to go do. And that's what, I think will continue to be my life's work.
Yeah. Well, so my brain's going two directions. We'll go one way first, and then we'll kind of swerve back based on what you were saying. So I was going to wait to ask you the tough questions until the end.
I brought it on myself.
Yeah. It's pretty, you did. I mean, let's be honest there. So much for that vision piece.
Yeah.
But it's so funny. And, I also believe in using private sector practices to drive change. So you and I are aligned in that. But there are naysayers in the world, and rightfully, right? There's certainly room for criticism to make the process better, but private equity is kind of a funny place for impact to land. Right? If functionally, there's a lot of financial engineering that goes on, there's a lot of attention or utilization, let's just be clear, of debt and other financial instruments that can be really challenging for companies, or it can create challenging environments for in which companies may try to grow. How do you think about that? And does the fund think about it in a different way, maybe than Greg thinks about it in a different way?
Yeah, let me offer two thoughts. I think number one, if you were to sort of stratify, an organized society into, component parts like the government, whether it be state or local, philanthropy, the private sector, individuals. Clearly, we all have a lot of explaining to do and some real burden of proof that somehow societal challenges were best handled in any of those spheres. Clearly, no matter how you break it down, the world we live in contains lots of, points of not just challenge, but deep, sometimes intractable challenges that have not been solved. It's why there's a such thing as an MIT, solver in the very first place. Those challenges are real. I'm not sure anybody has the moral authority to say that this is, they show the way towards addressing these challenges writ large. So that'd be my first point. The second point, Casey, one of the first lessons I think you learn as an investor really is to understand that in my case, the stock doesn't know that you own it. So being defensive about correcting an error, is something that requires mindship. So people can defend their mistakes or their old ideas. So when you ask the question, is private equity actually a good, test kitchen for an impact point of view? And the answer naturally is, of course, but not necessarily, right? It all depends on the point of view that you bring to the table. Yeah. If by private equity you mean the act of aggregating, capital, looking to, invest behind, premium returns, where secular trend growth in the ability to back, credentialed, management teams and entrepreneurs who are doing exciting things, then the answer is, of course, yes. The answer is not just yes, but obviously yes. If your idea, on the other hand, is that this is a haven for robber barons, to behave badly, then the answer is no. I would tell you that it is a tool. Same as a hammer in your hand might be different than a hammer in mine. So too is the act of extending private capital, no matter the stage, filled with opportunities to invest that capital wisely. I make the point around secular trend growth because nearly any impact, theme that you could invest behind really is emblematic of a world that is changing and evolving in ways that put these investment opportunities right in front of you. I've talked at length about things like, access to clean water. That's a big, very, intractable challenge, but very valuable, for the technologies that come to market to solve it. So I almost put that question on others. Is it wise to want capital to go to address that, or is it not? And to the extent that, private capital offers you a real chance to scale and accelerate those companies, my answer is yes, it's as fine a test kitchen as any other.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I want to make sure to reserve some time to go. The other part of that question is around the homogeneous nature of both sort of the work and also looking for founders who may not have access to some of the traditional systems. So we'll table that for now because I have one more question on this sort of financial side. The scale piece is super interesting. The idea that we may not be doing a good job right now of helping teams grow fast enough that they can absorb the capital that you are aggregating along the way. And how do we think about supporting those teams? And is it a sector question that, okay, well, we really should only, at scale, we can only support sustainability and clean water solutions, and everything else, we can find alternatives to fund that? Or is it a continuum question of we need to do a better job moving upstream to start supporting founders earlier on to help kind of shepherd them through?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. I understand it, and it's an interesting thought. I would tell you from an investment perspective, any sort of credentialed investor probably would have the view that there's enough available capital to sort of back and accelerate entrepreneurs and ideas of merit. I think lots of entrepreneurs of course, would have the inverse view, right? They all, everyone has the right to feel like their work is of merit, and what's really in short supply is capital. I think the sort of, incredibly interesting and messy middle, offers an opportunity for that conversation to be ferreted out. It's why not all investors, deliver premium returns. It's why not all entrepreneurs don't raise, scaled equity capital or debt for that matter to enact their ideas. When it works, however, it works to the point where it gives us all reason to continue to conduct that conversation. So I'm not sure if investing early, for its own sake is the right idea. I think lots of ideas are immature, need to be proven. On the other hand, attractive opportunities usually come in the presence of incredibly strong execution, but against interesting challenges that, when solved, offer a very valuable solution. And for our part, I think a universe of investors can be, more ambitious and, and focus on problems worth solving. The idea that you produce a bird that dances across the screen and that could attract, $1 zillion. I'm not sure that activity done to excess, helps address challenges that we all consider to be germane and valuable. So I think there is a point to be made that investors, can't, lose ambition. That part of the job is risk taking on your way to delivering real return for your investors.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue for really digging into both the obligation of an investor, especially at this point in time when, let's be totally candid, critical conversations around race and inequity are so front of mind. And you referenced entrepreneurs who feel like there may not be capital available for ideas of merit. How are these conversations reshaping your work in terms of founders and leadership? Or other, and let's just kind of start there.
It's such an interesting thought. I mentioned earlier that this time period is actually making the case more than you ever really could for why we have to. There's a sort of rethink underway, and it feels urgent. You could look at any corner of the world along the dimension of many issues, and you'd say there's a need to, think about things differently. When it comes to the issue of race and inequity in particular, it's one of the, least challenging things from a, does this make sense or not perspective, but one of the most challenging in the sense that it often requires, hearts and minds to evolve in ways that they haven't over, hundreds of years or more. Let me tackle the first thing. When I say it's one of the easiest, inequity is not only sort of growth limiting, but in many cases it's immoral, and I think you have to work hard, to drive systematic discrimination, over and again. So when you think about the legal and moral implications of such a thing, you kind of get to an easy answer that this is just wrong. It's wrong-headed on its face. But I think what's really underexplored, especially in an information-rich society, how do you become a society, anywhere close to a better version of itself when so many, people are left behind? You can't credibly say that you've done a good job, rigorously looking for a new employee if you don't look for talent in every corner. You can't do a great job as an investor if you systematically ignore places where innovation is being driven, and so on. So discriminatory practice, is backward in its thinking. And it's almost shocking to the conscience that we would allow ourselves to live in a context where so many people feel on the outside. Driving prosperity to the edges of society is something that is, not only sensible, but it's obvious. And for some reason, the second part of thinking about how hearts and minds sometimes can be slow to evolve. I think we ought to be clear that there's been patterns where people's systemic inability to hook onto the mainstream economy is about discriminatory practices, almost to the harm of growth to our national identity and so on. So I think it's both an easy thing to understand, how in terms of how backward it is, but not an easy thing to change. And I think the history of this country is replete with examples where progress, especially around the anniversary of the suffrage movement, there's not a happy story really to be told, right? This is a story of, these rights and prerogatives around basic freedoms, needing to be fought for and blood shed for. And I think the more clearly we look at that, the more we can evolve beyond it. But the looking at it clearly has been a challenge unto itself.
Yeah. And how do you think about that with respect to the day-to-day? Because, right, there are two sides of this, to your point on two parts. There's the internal controls of how do we make sure that we're not stuck in a homogenous group of or echo chamber on the internal work. And that can be true both from at a fund, at a corporation, wherever, right? So there's that work. And then there's sort of the end game massive societal change that we're looking for. Do you think that that's a linear? Do you think that's a linear equation where if we change the internal stuff, the external stuff changes? Or do you think there's more of a circular change that we can sort of tackle both from both directions?
Yeah, I guess the way I think about it is it's very much not linear. It is sort of flat. And then, events occur and step function, change is possible. And then we exist on a new plane until there's reason to change it. Yeah. And that just seems to be a glitch in the software of our species, right? We just need things to break, before having a strong enough incentive to change them. And I think on enough matters in the public sphere, enough things feel like they're, broken or in the process of breaking. But there's suboptimality almost everywhere, where the desire to change them feels, pretty opportune. And I think particularly for many of us who would be on a call like this one, for the most part, highly educated in a job you like, or at least have, employment prospects, you probably wouldn't be that bothered, by a world that doesn't change dramatically until you look at the empirics, which tell you that there's not a lot of social mobility. It is the case that the next generation of children stand a very low likelihood of earning what their parents did. And these big tectonic plates moving in relation to what American history has looked like. Generation after generation, at the very least, held that promise. But things like income inequality, that's not an academic issue. This is something that has become more widespread. And I describe it in the terms of it's growth limiting, because I want to make sure the people understand that by pushing prosperity out, by thinking of our economic system as not being zero sum, you start to dream up new possibilities where people's ability to exist, closer to their full potential allows them to add things, and consume more and, patronize your business and you patronize mine. The spiral upward, we've kind of taken for granted over the last few decades that our system is supposed to kick out, by definition, a level of income inequality that it does. And you can see that we're paying for that lazy kind of thinking. And so now people are thinking of ways to exist in a construct that looks, in many cases, somewhat different than the one we've been living under. I think that's healthy, and may the best ideas that benefit the broadest number of people and push prosperity out aggressively, may that be the winning set of ideas.
Yeah. And so how does that, and this is a question I certainly think about a lot, given our structure at Solver Innovation Future, we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we are trying to recycle capital to reinvest in Solver teams than you might in your context. Have you all started to see, for example, interest from some of your entrepreneurs around employee ownership or stewardship ownership or some of these alternative concepts that might protect sort of the frontline worker, but might actually jeopardize at least the investment horizon through which your return might actually realize? How do you think about that? That some of these efforts might cost more and slow down your investment, but may in the long run be better for the employees or the customers or whoever that may be. To a certain extent, it's picking up in some of the business roundtable conversations in the last year. We have to have another metric in addition to sort of the bottom line. But I'm wondering if you're starting to see that in your work on a day-to-day basis and how you're thinking about trying to bring those two concepts together.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. What I might say is one of the most satisfying pieces of my work is that I get a chance to interact with entrepreneurs who are thinking in these ways already, but we not only validate that through our investment, but we also help to give them tools and language, but they're already on fire to add what I think of, excuse me, Casey, add what I think of as impact value creation across a number of dimensions, and to not see it as being competitive with their business model. It's not a thing that you do as an aside or something that you feel is deleterious to your business model, but something where the success in over a bunch of dimensions is quite reliant on the impact value you create. So simply put, you're in business to deliver high quality opportunity to your customers, and to those who do that, they earn the right to gain more business. When I think about that in a case of, for example, addiction treatment, you're not there just to receive payment. You're there to deliver a service and improve, people's opportunity to be healthy. So I think it does follow that the person who's delivering the most impact, i.e. the most health in that context, where people are recovering under the care of that kind of, advanced care model, it should stand to reason that they will be the ones who get talked about and, recommended and so forth. They'll be the growers of the industry, whereas people for whom the impact is beside the point, you kind of run them through a program and whatever happens on the other side of that is not your business. It should stand to reason that business will not, drive outsized success and so on. And I frankly, Casey, look at every business like that. But not only that, when you are impact minded, I believe that you attract, employees who are happier, more productive, and want to stay longer. They think like owners, and so on. When you're a steward of the environment, and you see that as a part of your responsibility, it's likely that you'll use fewer raw materials and you'll be innovative just in the way that Jose was talking about, and you'll be more profitable perhaps as a result. So it's almost the inverse of how people tend to think of it, where the less innovative you are, the less likely you will to demonstrate outsized growth, attract high quality employees, or to deliver things that are valuable to others. And the more innovative you are, the more likely you're going to do the opposite. So I've always felt like being impact minded stood you a real chance to be the sort of outsized grower and offer an investor like myself an opportunity at premium returns.
And given all that, because I agree with you, I do think that if you're a place that people want to work, you're more likely to create value in the long run, and be a successful, sustainable entity. I'm curious if there's someone you love. If there was a company or a founder that you think has knocked the cover off the ball in terms of both impact and investability, who would you cite?
Oh, gee, you're asking me to choose between all my children, right?
Your children.
Look, I would tell you, just because we talked a little bit about the issue of sort of education and workforce development, one of our shining examples is Penn Foster, who sort of delivers online education at a low cost per credit hour.
Yeah.
And we know, and I think all of us can take for granted that the upskilling and reskilling, especially for lower middle skilled labor, is a sort of generations long pursuit. So there's real secular growth to do what they do, which is to add significant value, but at a reasonable cost, so that the ROI for the increased skills and opportunity to be, to get an educational opportunity like that one, that ROI staying strong has everything to do with the value proposition you can deliver. Yeah. So their opportunity to come, get more educated and upskilled, and then get a job that they like, oftentimes at materially higher wages, like that in its simplest form is exactly what we are looking for in our entrepreneurs. Yeah. And I think backing them to help them grow feels important. It feels this is what you want to get up and go try to achieve in your work every day, is supporting entrepreneurs who are doing important things, and things that are easy to verify. You don't have to think about me offering you spin, but it's just right there for you to say these students are verifiably better off on the other side of our investment, and this business being scaled by professional investors who can offer them tools that they wouldn't ordinarily have access to. It's the right thing in the way capitalism ought to work. Yeah. And that's we're looking for those entrepreneurs all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think you've hit on, that's exactly what always comes back to me of why is this work important? Because we can drive real change, and it's fun and energizing to hear others get excited about the work that they're doing. Because I think the more ideas that we share, the better that we can work together as a field to use some of these new strategies to help scale some of these organizations.
If I can just add one thing on that, Casey, we've made 12 investments in the life of this fund so far. I think it's something like 1,200 that we looked at to do that, to make that portfolio. I can't tell you.
I feel really sad for your analysts.
Well, what I would tell you, there are a lot of airplane miles for me too, by the way. But when traveling still was a thing, what I would tell you though is that the level of innovation that exists out in the world is really where the action is. As an investor, in many cases, you are a lagging indicator. Yeah. But I am encouraged by all of the incredibly smart and talented people who are dedicating their lives to address big societal challenges. That's what will change the world, I think, for us. We'll do deals that we like, and it will have a portfolio, and over time we will have built a great franchise, I believe, for Bain Capital. And it's not a mistake that this fund, the first of its kind in the private equity field, was started at Bain Capital in particular. But we're one fund and we are one firm. What's really exciting is the way the world is changing. Yeah. And I give all of the due credit to entrepreneurs who wake up and say, this is something that I want to give birth to. And even more than that, skilled operators who are executing at a level where they're scaling businesses, doing incredible work. That's who I admire. And I, at least talk to people like that on a daily basis. And if you're doing that, how can you not have what we talked about at the beginning, which is the level of optimism that you described, but also give yourself permission to look further into the future for how some of these problems that we seek to address, are eradicated altogether, or at least we, sort of strike a mighty blow against them. And that's what I come to work to try to do every day. Yeah. Well,
I gave short shrift to your vision. You set up Jose perfectly. We can bring Jose back onto the stage. And I think I want to start in two places. I would love and there are lots of questions coming in from the team, from the field, from the webinar, more broadly, the audience. But I would start to say, recognizing that typically, Greg, you're probably meeting founders who've been working on their efforts longer than Jose has been working on his. What advice would you give to Jose so that he can build some processes into his work to be better suited to work with someone like Bain Capital, Double Impact in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I've never started a business, and although I've invested in many hundreds of businesses and seen many thousands over a career, I'm jealous of all entrepreneurs, and one of the reasons is because they always, every day they wake up thinking that they can do the impossible. I never think that. I'm quite conventional in my thinking at times, and so the idea that you could take on, structures and governments and change consumer behavior, it really is remarkable. So on that alone, great credit and respect. If I were to give one piece of counsel, it would probably be, innovation by definition ought to be an iterative idea on the, an iterative concept on the way to doing the impossible. Realize that your first or second or 10th idea may not be the path that ultimately wins out. So with all of the conviction that we know all entrepreneurs have, pair it with the requisite amount of humility that the failure rate of, entrepreneurship is inordinately high. And so what it means is that you have to have conviction to go down a path, to gain information, but also flexibility to change course when something isn't quite working when you hoped. And the art is really in the middle of how long do you go down a path before you decide for yourself this isn't the winning one. But that conviction, every entrepreneur has that. Not all have the humility and the ability to iterate when something's not quite working, and the openness to, rapid, redesign and sort of, rapid feedback loops is, is probably the thing that I'd hold out as being a really important characteristic to embody.
Okay. Jose, I don't know if you want to respond to that, but there were two questions from Shri and one from Geeta that are looking specifically actually at this concept. Shri was asking about where do you start when you have such a large and complex problem that you're tackling? And from Geeta, she flagged that the pandemic has seen a shift back to single-use and disposable behaviors. How do you move that? So Greg, to your point, Jose, you're going broad and you're dealing with externalities. How are you thinking about that to make sure that you've nailed the product from Algramo with enough, a strong conviction loosely held in terms of what your product is and how you can grow and move that forward?
Yeah, first to give a little of context why I start with Algramo. I started Algramo while I was studying business and economics and decided to move into a poor neighborhood with 3 other classmates because they were teaching us only that companies that are focusing on making profits for the shareholders. Mm-hmm. And we decided to move away from that and to live as a common Chilean. Mm-hmm. And we spent there a year and a half. And I started Algramo because actually I was purchasing in a small format and I realized that I was affecting me and everyone in the neighborhood. Yeah. So I would say that how to stick to the purpose is to be on the ground and to understand the problem. This is not going to be solved through an Excel sheet, through a board meeting. This is going to happen on the street, knowing the customer, knowing the problem. One thing good coming from LATAM that we have been facing, and especially coming from Chile, we have been having all the problems, earthquake, tsunamis, inequality, poverty, all of it. So we have been learning a lot from difficulties, and Algramo is a solution that comes from that. Actually, it's the most obvious innovation. I always say that we're selling in bulk grains and product, but I would say that we're always stick to the problem, thinking on the eyes of the consumer that doesn't have enough money to purchase in large quantities, and also they're suffering the problem of the packaging waste in their neighborhoods. Yeah. So I would say that we focus on that, plus we shift and we pivot, as Greg was saying actually, to pivot to collaborate with others. So that's how we are approaching. We cannot do everything by ourselves. There's already enough brands in the market, that already retailers and stores in the market. So now we're focused how to collaborate and to do partnership with them to increase the impact and scale as fast as possible. Because again, we have 10 years until 2030. These Paris Agreement goals must be done. And to reach those, we should be doing something totally different of what we are doing today. And to change in an exponential way, we need to do some collaboration that they weren't thought in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to push with using the technology to reach that impact, collaborating with others, and to being stick in the eyes of the consumer, putting the UX experience in the center of the solution. Yeah. We're always focusing on reducing the cost plus eliminating the need for a new packaging.
Yeah. Interesting question that builds off of this in terms of you've been talking about the end user, and Greg and I touched a little bit about practices, internal practices and controls for entrepreneurs and for founders as they grow. Scott asked Greg, and I think actually it's applicable to you, Jose, as well. Have you started thinking about universal basic income experiments, and how does that impact the way you hire your team and start to build some of not just economic questions or strategies, but also sort of some of the DEI stuff that we're seeing in the US? Are you thinking about that as you build your team? And I guess, Greg, following up on that, if you saw sort of a universal basic income experiment in one of your investees, would that be a boon to potential investment? So maybe we'll start with Jose and then go to Greg.
Yeah, that's a huge question, and I think it's really relevant because from one side, the operation of the company could have an impact, but what happens inside the company. For example, to give you a number in Chile, to give you context, the average difference on the salaries between the top one and the bottom one in Chile in a company is more than 100 times. That's the average difference on salaries in Chile. And Latin America is one of the most unequal regions in the world. And we're measuring that in Algramo. Most of the big corporations also does. Today, our ratio is somewhere between 10 to 12 times. We're trying to stick up to maximum 12. We have been studying how this happened in different companies and also define a minimal wage that almost 3 times the minimum wage in Chile. Because we understand that impact of the company should start from inside, and then the operation also should happen for the external user. But internally, we should measure that. Otherwise, we're going to be replicating the same inequality that we're trying to solve with our solution. Yeah.
Just really, I think it's exciting to hear. I think Greg and I sort of landed in this conversation at the end of we have to start building as a world, as a team, to be particularly articulate about this. But some of these practices into the work that we're doing. Greg, I'm curious if you're looking for some of your companies, or as I say, would that be a boon if you saw some sort of experimentation within a corporate structure?
Yeah, I don't look at it necessarily as a potential boon for us, for the company. I guess what I really like is even in how you put it in terms of experimentation. I think there's this sensibility that, and I used the word dogma earlier, that things are sort of as they've always been. And that's just untrue. I think in many cases, the middle class in America owes not much of, but nearly all of its sort of march toward, a higher standard of living through government action. Yeah. There's the Social Security Act, whether it's the various Homestead Acts, around granting land, whether it is the sort of Wagner Act, around unionization. I think there has always in this country existed a sense that, a system that relentlessly, produces winners and losers, a system like our own where it produces winners and losers so relentlessly requires some redistributive act where the opportunity set gets refreshed. In fact, for entrepreneurs who don't win, there are incentives, to try again. For people who, extend themselves to take risk that we all benefit from or are inventive. There's this opportunity to, participate, in programmatic elements where you can get some research, potentially paid for example. That sense of sort of shared destiny is really not a economic system. It is really about cultural cohesion. First. And I think that idea that there's this shared destiny is something that you can tell is eroding, especially in the United States. And I think that that's something that has everything to do with the kind of economic success we can have. So when you think about something like universal basic income, for all those who think that that is not the government's role, it's not an honest reading of history to think that such things haven't been tried in the past. So that level of innovative thinking or trial and error or willing to experiment things, it's not dogmatic, I find essential. That may be a methodology that's successful or not, but the idea that the least among us aren't participants, in our mainstream economy and society, that, as I mentioned earlier, feels wrong-headed, and all efforts to bring that segment of our population into the main is determinative for the success that we can have as a country.
Yeah, super interesting. And I think that the idea, we didn't touch on this yet, but the idea of sort of where does the private sector, where does the public sector come together to start to deliver some of these services, and how do we think about that? There's a question that piggybacks nicely from that concept. If we don't have, 6 minutes probably isn't enough time to really dig into those roles. But if we think about the public sector and the private sector and the roles of those institutions or systems more broadly, how should the private sector, Greg, think about measuring impact and success? And sort of on the micro level, maybe the easier question is, how are you thinking about success at Bain Double Impact, both from a metrics perspective and sort of obviously the qualitative side? We've talked a lot about the qualitative side of what does success look like, but I'm curious, what would you say, how would you characterize success?
Yeah, I think, look, we decided to focus on three meta, trends and big societal challenges. One of them is health and wellness. I think we know that, opportunity for, highly, high quality healthcare, is something that eludes too many of us. So I think there we're thinking about driving, high quality care, to populations that don't tend to get it. The old and indigent, poor, Medicaid funded, different disease states, rural areas. Development, pretty self-explanatory. And then within sustainability, we think a lot about climate remediation, energy efficiency, resource conservation. And I think all of those do lend themselves to some quantitative, objectivity in sort of tracking how good you're doing.
Yeah. And super interesting to this idea of you guys can go macro, right? Can you roll up to the portfolio level to think about your impact across three sectors? Jose, on your day-to-day, it seems somewhat obvious, at least if I'm not mistaken, thinking about plastics reutilization, decreasing utilization, increasing reusables or refillables over time. What are the other metrics that you're thinking about from success on the day-to-day level?
Yeah, the other one that we measured a lot is the savings for the end user. So for example, today when someone purchases us 100 milliliters of this soap, we compare that regular price into the market with the ones that are paying with us. And we calculate based on savings. For example, in that example, they're saving around 60% of what they should be paying for that based on the market or business as usual today. So we're also measuring the savings on each purchase, depends on the volume that they're purchasing. Plus, we calculate the packaging. We decide to translate that impact into equivalent of plastic bags. So, for example, when someone is refilling this bottle, these bottles has the same grams of plastic as 32 plastic bags. So in the app, the user has that number and they have that traceability. And then we are building some gamifications around the numbers of equivalent of plastic bags that they're saving. So not only us and the investors, they know that, also the customer is driven by that impact.
Yeah, super interesting. The gamification piece, someone actually asked a question, and I don't have time to address it because I have one question left for both of you that I definitely want to cover, but this gamification piece is not super dissimilar from a question that came up around, is there an opportunity for micro-lending to incentivize people to collect recycling opportunities? I don't know how exactly that worked, but the idea of incentivizing either by sharing or gamifying the impact or by having some sort of reward for every time someone reused their product. Is that something you've experimented with at all?
And actually, it's something that is working today. So following the example of this bottle, when someone fills this bottle, we're saying that they're saving the equivalent of 32 plastic bags, and we give them $1 as a deposit into this packaging, not into the account. So for example, if someone else pick this bottle up, they will use that $1. So the bottle has the money, so we are giving them this deposit into the bottle to give them the economic incentive to reuse that. So that's something is happening today.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to see that so sticky, and to see you again referencing Greg's comment earlier around being flexible and being able to build in some new some new products and techniques along the way for you to grow. And I guess for both of you, the last question that I'd love to close on is, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self if you could go back and with the benefit of hindsight? What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self? And happy to start with whomever feels moved by the question.
Jose, you got to go first. I was a mess then, so I have to think harder.
I'm 32, so I'm not that far away from that. But I would say that something that I thought in the beginning, that then I realized that I was mistaken, was I picked the wrong competitors in my mind. I thought that I was competing against other company or other solution, and actually I was competing against the problem. And that took me some years to realize. So I would start collaborating from the beginning with others. Not saying, okay, this is my idea, and it's not here, it's competing against me. But it's totally the opposite. So the faster you open your idea and share with others, it's going to scale faster. So I would recommend that from the beginning.
Yeah, you're lucky. I'm just still, battling the two sides of my own brain. So the idea that there's actually a solution at the end of yours is great. What about you, Greg? What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Yeah, you know what? I guess the one thing I've learned more than anything else is that there's only one true luxury, and that's time, and how you think about the time you have, from the people you spend it to, the kind of work that you do, is one of the most critical things that critical decisions you can make. I think my 20-year-old self probably wasn't prepared, to treat all of the time that I had as precious. I gave it away, so easily. But the idea that you invest, your full self in things in people that you really love, activities that ignite you, that's where you'll get your best results, I think, in life. That's what I would say.
Also excellent advice. And I think partially why I feel so lucky to have the conversation with you all is you both inspire me on a day-to-day basis. I love getting to chat with you. We are so grateful that you were able to join us today. To the audience, we're really grateful that you were able to join us today. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. This is why we do the work, to find smart, creative, passionate people and use those the ideas that come from these conversations, from the collaboration, from the time spent to drive change. As noted in the chat, we value your opinions. Please do fill out the survey. If you were impressed by Jose's work and you're interested in supporting more social entrepreneurs like him, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Please do feel free and join us back here in 2 weeks for the next Solving from Anywhere on September 1st. I'll be your host in the back seat, sitting on the couch, not leading the conversation, from the session on COVID-19, innovation to accelerate global health and vaccine development. And I'm going to read this with Dr. David Kaufman, Head of Translational Development at the Bill and Melinda Gates Medical Research Institute, and Dr. Vanessa Carey, CEO of Seed Global Health. The conversation will be moderated while I'm on the couch by Pooja Wang, lead of our health community at MIT Solve. In the meantime, please do reach out if you have questions. We'd love to hear from you. Again, a big thank you to Greg and Jose, and we can't wait to see you back in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much.